Hey, how's it going? I'm Carlo from All You Can Board, and I'm here today with a new game announcement video. So this is some upcoming games. Some of these games have been announced in the past maybe week or two. Other ones may have been initially announced within the last maybe few months. Some of these I might be slightly late to the party on, but see, these are some upcoming games, most in 2021, some in 2022, that I've got my eye on so far that I want to share with you guys. So we're going to kick it off with the first one on the list here, which is called Free Ride. So this is designed by Friedemann Friese, who you might recognize most notably from Power Grid. He's also designed games as Fresh Fish, Fast Sloths. He's designed a bunch of the solo mode games in that Fast Forward series. This has art from Harald Lieske, and it's published by 2F Spiel. I think it's going to be published by Rio Grande in North America. So basically this is a train game for 1 to 5 players. And the idea is you're basically trying to visit as many cities as possible as you can across Europe, catching as many free rides along the way as you can, hence the name of the game. So the idea is there's going to be 3 different types of railways that you can traverse across throughout the game, either ones that are owned by yourself, ones that are owned by another player, or state-owned lines. And if you're going across your own or state-owned lines, it's free. But if you want to use a line or a railway that's owned by another player, you have to pay them a coin. And once you've done that, it then converts that into a state-owned line once that's happened once. So throughout the game, you're trying to decide, again, where do you catch those free rides on the state-owned lines? When are you willing to pay a player a coin to use theirs and then convert it for the rest of the game? So there's all kinds of cool stuff in there. Friedemann Friese is known, like I've only actually played Power Grid of all his games. I own Friday, which is a solo game, and I also recently picked up Fresh Fish. Have not had a chance to play it yet, but a lot of his games have, or most of his games that I'm familiar with, have a lot of player interaction and have a lot of interesting ideas. He tends to be a very experimental designer. He tends to do a lot of stuff in his games that I don't see in other games, whether that be the theme. I mean, just thinking back on the game Fast Sloths, like you're getting carried around an island by different animals and stuff. And in this, one of the things I really like about Free Ride, one of the aspects of it is you can kind of quit the game early. Like once you've met a certain number of requirements, you can quit and get out of the game, remove your train from the map, and then at that point you just watch the other players play, and every time it would normally be your turn gets skipped and you gain a coin. And at the end of the game, every coin that you have is worth 3 points. So you're trying to kind of race to finish up and be out of the game sooner. You won't have any say over the end game state at that point, but you're going to just keep basically racking up points as the other players go around. So a lot of cool stuff. The rulebook is already on the Board Game Geek page, so you can go check out the full rules there. I'm definitely interested in this quite a bit. Friedemann Friese, as I said, is a designer whose games really fascinate me. This is one that is going to be available in Europe pretty shortly, actually, I think in August. And then by all sounds from the publishers, it'll be about 8 to 10 weeks to get to the US. So it should be in the US by the end of 2021. So keep an eye out for that. Again, that is Free Ride. Okay, up next on the list here is Imperial Steam. This is designed by Alexander Humer, who designed Lignum. This is published by Capstone Games, and the art is by Andreas Resch. So this is another train game on the list. This one seems to be maybe a little more of the traditional sense compared to the one we just looked at, Free Ride. So this is an economic pick up and deliver game. You're going to be sort of building and expanding your network, hiring and training workers, building factories, producing and delivering goods. And then basically you're going to be upgrading your locomotives to carry more goods and more passengers across your different networks. So you're basically, managing your kind of business operations there, while trying to, spot any opportunities you can to get little competitive advantages over your opponents. So it's sort of being billed as a highly strategic yet accessible game. So it's not supposed to be a really heavy, brutal train game necessarily. It's supposed to be, sort of inviting and accessible, like a lot of the other games around this kind of weight level that Capstone has been putting out. There's 2 interesting game ending rules that each lead to their own scoring steps, where you either the route to Trieste is complete, or when after the end of the 8th round, you'll score based on one of those 2 criteria. So this is a 2 to 4 player game. It takes about 2 hours to play. Pre-orders are available as of August 1st, and it's hitting retail later this year. In October, it will debut at Essen Spiel. So yeah, the artwork looks beautiful. There isn't a whole lot more details out there so far in terms of the rules or how the game actually plays. But if you go on the Board Game Geek page, you can see some information, and there's also some more information on the Capstone Games page. So we will be keeping an eye out for that one releasing later this year. That is Imperial Steam. All right, shifting gears now away from the train games onto the next one on the list, which is called Soul Raiders. Now, this is designed by Marc-André, who is the designer of Splendor as well as Barony. Various artists here, 12 different artists, so I'm not going to list all their names, and this is published by One for All. This is actually currently on Kickstarter as of July 7th. It is a 1 to 4 player game, and it is a cooperative, sort of story-based game. A storytelling game. It's got a high fantasy theme. The playtime is listed as 120 to 240 minutes, and it's basically designed like a book. One thing you might not know is Marc-André. I don't know a whole lot about him as a writer, but he is listed on Board Game Geek as an author, which I didn't know before this game. I just knew him as the designer of Splendor and Barony. But yeah, it's designed like a book, so it's divided into chapters or sessions, and each one is going to take average about an hour or two. Players are acting simultaneously, and again, it's a cooperative game, so there's decisions you're going to be making at the same time as your party members, and you have a common health pool for your party, so you're going to win or lose together, so there's going to be a way that you track damage, but that's going to affect everyone. I really like that because there are a lot of other cooperative games, if you think of other card games and stuff, like even something like Aeon's End or Marvel Champions, these games where you're like everyone has their own health pool. I think it is cool. There's kind of that shared incentive of, it's not like, oh, if they're getting low on health and this person dies, oh, that's fine. It's like, no, we all have to really work together to make sure that we kind of stay alive. It kind of drives that the shared incentives aspect of cooperative games a little more, which I really like. There's also an aspect of where there's like a time aspect in the game. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work, but if you stay idle for too long, there's a threat track that moves along that adds this time pressure that kind of speeds things up. And there's the quests, like when I say it's a storytelling game, the quests aren't linear. They kind of branch out and they're interwoven so that there are multiple different paths to progress. And I think I saw it said something along the lines of, if you play through it, one character or whatever might see, like, in one play might see like 20% approximately of what there is to see in terms of all the different paths you can take and the places you can go. So, and the other thing, it kind of stresses on the Kickstarter page or on the Board Game Geek page that it's not supposed to be seen as primarily a narrative game, like a storytelling game. It's not just there to tell a story. It's a cooperative kind of adventure game, but throughout the narration is kind of secondary. It says to kind of think of it as a world with a bunch of secrets to uncover, and the narrative is there kind of in the backdrop to facilitate your exploration of this world. So I know it sounds a little bit obscure. It mentions that there's over 1,000 cards in there. There's art from people who have done art on Magic the Gathering. It looks like a pretty big, pretty hefty game. Again, it's on Kickstarter. There's a whole lot more information on there right now. Highly recommend you check that out. That is Soul Raiders. Okay, sticking on the theme of story-based games, we've got a very interesting one now, which was just recently announced. I just saw this announced on Twitter a few days ago, earlier this week perhaps, and it's called Artisans of Splendent Vale. So this is designed by Nikki Valens. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Valens. The art in this is done by Lil Chan, Cleonique Hilsaka, and Lisa Pierce, and this is published by Renegade Game Studios. So it's a 2 to 4 player game, and this is going to be a cooperative adventure storytelling game with some legacy elements. So this is another one that unfortunately I don't have a whole lot of information on how it actually plays. If you go to the BGG page, you'll see it's pretty bare. There isn't a lot of stuff, but there's quite a few paragraphs there just kind of going into the story. It sounds like there's a streak of red in the sky, a meteor hits, and the story basically takes place in this magical land where everyone's trying to hone their individual crafts. There are apparently tactical action scenes. This is how it's quoted on the page. Tactical action scenes played out on specialized grid maps. So I don't know if that's... I'm almost wondering if it's like from... You might be familiar with games like Final Fantasy Tactics. These type of tactical game, like this isn't what I was expecting when I first read about it. When I first heard who was the designer and that it was a very story-based game, I wasn't expecting this kind of aspect to it, and I'm still not exactly sure if it's what I think it is, but it sounds like there's going to be some kind of grid-type puzzles to figure out in a cooperative sense, so I'm intrigued to see more about that. And it also mentions that there's going to be sort of individual interludes that you can get sent on to develop your own character and your own narrative path separate from that of the group. So From everything I've heard of Legacy of Dragonholt, I bought it after hearing some fantastic reviews. I'm not normally really big into these narrative type games. I don't really look for a whole lot of storytelling in board games, and now I've totally got my eye on Artisans of Splendent Vale. The art looks incredible as well. This one I think is set for a 2022 release. Again, I wish I had more info about this, but that's all we've got for now, so keep an eye out for that. That is Artisans of Splendent Vale. Okay, now we're going to go to some lighter affair here. We're going to switch it up and move on to the next one, which is called The Gardens. So this is co-designed by Matthew Dunstan, who has designed Monumental, as well as Brett J. Gilbert, who is a co-designer of Mandala. Together, these two designers have also done Elysium, which I have not played myself. The art is by Kerry Aitken, and this is published by Grail Games. So this game will be on Kickstarter within the next month or two. Last I saw, I think it said August. It's a 2 to 4 player game, takes about 30 to 45 minutes, and basically it's a drafting, set collection, tile placement game. The theme is kind of the Sydney's Royal Botanic Garden, so you can see like the Opera House and Duck Pond and stuff. Basically, players are going to be building a tableau with 3 areas. There's going to be a water side, the grass in the center, and then the, the city side. And basically, every turn you're going to be adding a card to your tableau until your area is completely filled. And at which point, whenever the areas are all filled, you'll do the final scoring. But after you place a card, every time you add a card into your tableau, you're also scoring points for what your visitors can see in your gardens. So there's the tableau building element, there's some spatial elements in terms of where things are going and what your visitors can see. It's billed as a very kind of easy to learn game that comes with some modules for variability and for some advanced play. So there's mid-game goals and end-game scoring tiles, there's advanced scoring tiles, and just little variants that you can add to mix it up from game to game, or if maybe you're a more experienced play group that's looking for some added depth. So it looks like a fairly simple game, relatively quick game, really nice art. I'm not really don't know a whole lot more about exactly how it plays or how it's going to come together. The rulebook actually is on the Board Game Geek page though, so you can go check it out there. As I said, the Kickstarter should be launching next month or so. This just looks like a nice light filler game, very nice table presence, really nice artwork, and I'm definitely curious to check out more of it. So that is The Gardens. All right, this next one here I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on because it is actually kind of a remake of a prior game. So this is called Thunder Road Vendetta. So this is a remake of Thunder Road, which is originally from 1986. There are, I believe, 6 different designers involved in this, so I won't name them all. The art's done by Marie Bergeron, and this is published by Restoration Games. So it's a 2 to 4 player game, takes about, it says, 45 to 75 minutes, and basically you're rolling dice, racing cars, shooting each other with your cars, and trying to basically avoid destruction at the hands of the other racers. So obviously, it's hard not to draw a comparison to Mad Max with the style already, the way it looks. There's a game from many, many years ago, I believe it was the late 80s, from Steve Jackson called Car Wars, that this sounds a little familiar. I actually have Car Wars on my shelf. It's been on there for a couple of years. I have not tried it yet, but by the sound of it, it's kind of a similar thing. I've also heard great things about Gaslands, which came out a couple of years ago, but basically the idea is you have a car, you can race around, you have guns on it, you're shooting each other, dice-based combat. It's not supposed to be a super serious competitive game. It's sort of supposed to just create those big explosive moments of fun, a lot of trash talking, that kind of thing. Obviously, with this type of remake, and what Restoration has been just doing an awesome job with, is bringing back these games and preserving what made them these classic memorable games, but also, again, the whole point of the name of the company, Restoration Games, they're restoring it. So they're adding a fresh coat of paint, something new that's going to kind of breathe new life back into the game. So there's new additions to the game, giving you more options on your turn. It's more in depth, but you are still, the essence of the game, the driving around, shooting each other, things blowing up, is still preserved. It's just giving you more variety, more options, sort of built-in expansion content. So I never played the original myself. To be honest, I'd never even heard of it until they had announced this one. But Restoration Games just had a whole bunch of recent announcements, including the 4 new fighters that are coming out in Unmatched Battle of Legends Volume 2. So go check them out online if you want to see any of their other recent announcements. But this was the big kind of game one that I saw, the reprint here, or remake, I should say. So that is, again, Thunder Road Vendetta, and I believe that's slated for release in 2022. There should be an October 21 Kickstarter, though. And the final item on the list is sort of a 4-in-1. I'm only going to cover 2 of them, but if you're familiar with Dr. Steve Finn, he's the designer of Biblios, which is an excellent filler game. He has a publishing company called Dr. Steve Finn, or Dr. Finn Games, I believe it's called. And basically, they've recently announced 4 new games, all slated for 2022. They are called Fisheries of Gloucester, Alpujarras, The Feds, and the Little Flower Shop dice game. I'm not going to get into all 4 of them. I'm just picked the 2 that caught my eye the most, that seemed the most interesting to me, that I'm going to touch on real quick. The first being Fisheries of Gloucester. This is a 2-player only game. It plays over 6 rounds, and each round represents a day. And each player has a certain number of time, so a number of hours in the game to perform certain actions. Each player has 3 boats, and you're basically racing along trying to find the best fishing spots, but certain actions that you take use more of your time or less of your time. So that whole, I'm always looking for these really interesting, like 2-player only games that have this really tight system, this back and forth kind of tug and war, this push and pull aspect. I haven't actually played any of Steve Finn's 2-player only games. I've played Biblios, which is a 2 to 4-player game. I really enjoyed it. He also designed Nanga Parbat, which just came out this year. I've not yet tried it. That's a 2-player only game. But Fisheries of Gloucester definitely caught my eye. And the other one, Alpujarras, is a 2 to 4-player game. And this one has the kind of Tokaido or patchwork aspect of the player who's the furthest back on the track, that's whose turn it is. So there's an aspect of you fall behind, but then you have the pick of where you go, and then kind of like Tokaido, you're jumping forward to pick one of the spots to land on, and then you get the ability or the action on that spot. So you're either going to be placing farmers, moving farmers, or expanding an irrigation channel, and you're going to be basically growing fruit to deliver to the towns, which you then sell for money. So it sounds like a fairly simple game in terms of the rules, but that whole patchwork or Tokaido element where I mentioned with the furthest player back kind of jumping ahead interests me. And again, anything that Steve Finn designs, I mean, he also co-designed a couple games the last few years that I've heard great things about that I've not yet tried, like Herbaceous and most recently the Whatnot Cabinet, which was co-designed with Eduardo Baraf. So yeah, always interested in what Steve Finn's up to and what games he's publishing, so definitely check out those 2 as well as the other 2 I mentioned, The Feds and the Little Flower Shop dice game, all slated for 2022. And those are all the upcoming game announcements I have for you today. What have I missed lately? Are there other game announcements that I've overlooked or that I saw and I just maybe completely forgot about? Which ones of these that I've mentioned excites you the most? Let me know which one and why, or if any of these don't look interesting to you, tell me why I've missed the mark on these. Always looking to hear from you guys, always interested in what you think. So either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.